All right, glad to welcome any and all who may be watching by YouTube today. We're having our Bible study time together here at the church in the sanctuary. Glad for all those who are here today, and glad for any and all who are able to watch on YouTube as we come together for our time of Bible study. We are looking at Psalm 34 today. This is the psalm that we will have in our worship service this week. I've highlighted and read those verses that will actually be a part of the reading on Sunday. But we're going to look at the whole of the psalm. It's a good psalm to do that for. It holds together well and has a couple of main thoughts. Even though we're only going to be using a portion of it for Sunday, the whole of it is very much worth our reflection this morning. This psalm will be read in response to Job chapter 42, verses 1 through 6 and 10 through 12a. The heart of that passage is that verse that I have written there for you. I had heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees thee. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. It's Job's response to God's response. We read God's response last week in worship. God basically saying to Job, who in the heck are you? Who do you think you are to tell me? Were you there when I laid the foundations of the earth? Were you there when I, put everything in motion? Then how come you're telling me, that I'm not doing right by you? Basically, it's the gist of what God told Job. Sometimes when you ask God to speak to you, be aware that it may not be exactly what you had in mind when you petitioned him to speak to you. That was certainly Job's situation. But Job, gets the message, gets the point, cowers in humility before the Almighty, and basically says, I didn't know who I was dealing with. You are much greater than I thought you were. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ears, but now my eye sees you. And so he has a tremendous experience of the Almighty, and it changes everything for him. And so when he looks back over all the trouble he's been through, it's almost as if it's nothing, because now he sees who God really is, and it puts everything in perspective. The second part of that passage, verses 10 through 12a, start to tell how Job's life got put back together. God blessed Job tremendously after this whole episode. And Job, all that Job had before was restored to him in abundance. And so the whole of this episode, the whole of Job's story really is, we get to see it, all the heartbreaking part of it, from start to finish, all the agony, all the sweat, we get to see it. And it looks like it plays out over a long period of time, and it usually does play out over a long period of time when we have a time of suffering or trouble. But the whole of it can be summed up. Job was in a time of trouble. He prayed to God, and God answered his prayer. That's the Reader's Digest version of the Job story. Of course, it's much bigger than that. But that's really the theme of the story. God, Job was in a time of trouble. Job was a righteous man. Job was in a time of trouble. Job prayed to God, and God answered Job and delivered him from his trouble. So Psalm 34 is a psalm that celebrates God's provision for a servant who has reached out to him and prayed to him in a time of trouble. And it's according to the note at the beginning of Psalm there in black. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. It's David, and it's a circumstance in his life, a moment when he is trying to escape from Saul, who was trying to take his life. So Psalm 34 is a proper response to the first reading on Sunday from Job chapter 42. We're celebrating the fact that God answers his servants, his faithful ones, his righteous ones, with deeds of salvation. And that's what we're going to celebrate. Concerning that note, we don't know who wrote that note. The note reads there, it's in the black underneath Psalm 34 on the page that you have. And it just tells, you'll see this on several of the Psalms, it will give the setting for the Psalm. Now, we don't know who wrote these notes, and we don't know, where they got the information from. And sometimes, as in this case, it's not exactly easy to see how they correspond with each other. So we don't know, who wrote it. It's some editor of some sort who put it in there, and where he got that information, we don't know. But the note says that this psalm is of David. It was written by David. And it was written after he feigned madness before Abimelech, so that he drove him out and he went away. If you turn, as some of you are already doing, to 1 Samuel, you will read the episode that is referenced here. The person that he actually flees from is King Achish, who is king of Gath. But in 1 Samuel 21, verses 10 through 15, you read an episode from David's life that I bet you didn't know. I had not remembered it. It's a time when David is running from Saul. David had served Saul. Saul was half mad, and David was brought in to help calm Saul down and to be a servant to him. But when David started having great success, Saul started to get very angry and jealous. And so eventually Saul comes to see David as enemy, especially after God tells him he's not going to be king anymore. And so Saul is trying to kill David. So in one episode, David flees to Gath. Verses 10 through 15 of chapter 21 in 1 Samuel. David rose and fled that day from Saul. He went to King Achish of Gath. The servants of Achish said to him, "Is this not David, the king of the land?" And David hadn't been made king yet, but it was already known that he had been anointed to be king, evidently. "Did they not sing to one another of him in dances?" That is, the people of Israel. "Did they not sing to each other in dances? Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. That was the source of Saul's jealousy, that David was getting great renown for his victories in battle, and he was being seen as greater than Saul. Verse 12, David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of King Achish of Gath. So he changed his behavior before them. He pretended to be mad when in their presence. He scratched marks on the doors of the gate and let his spittle run down his beard. Achish said to his servants, "Look, you see the man is mad. Why then have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen that you have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come to my house?" So David pulls it off. He plays, like he belongs in the insane asylum. And the king says, "Yes, indeed he does. Get him out of here." And so David is able to get out of the way. He had fear that Achish, if he knew who he was, would take advantage of that, turn him into Saul, or do something of his own to him. So in order to save himself from being in the hands of King Achish in Gath, David played the madman, and it delivered him. Now, those are just the bare details. We don't hear in there David praying to God, calling out to God, all that kind of stuff. We just get the bare details as they're told in the story. Surely you know, and David was a man of prayer. He was a man who was true to God's after God's heart, and so he certainly had to have been in prayer at some point. And certainly he'd asked God to deliver him somehow. Again, I don't know. We can't say for sure, whether this psalm actually is in response to God's deliverance of him in this place, or if that's just conjecture on the part of that editor. And it's of no real consequence in the end. But you know another story about David today for having come to this study. So there's that. At any rate, David writes this psalm, and David extols the goodness of God to his servant in a time of need. So let's read the whole of the psalm together, and then we will come back and talk about its parts. It splits up into a couple of parts. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. Look to him and be radiant, so your faces shall never be ashamed. This poor soul cried and was heard by the Lord and was saved from every trouble. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Happy are those who take refuge in him. Oh, fear the Lord, you his holy ones. For those who fear him have no want. The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, O children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Which of you desires life and covets many days to enjoy good? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their cry. The face of the Lord is against evildoers, to cut off the remembrance of them from the earth. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and rescues them from all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord rescues them from them all. He keeps all their bones. Not one of them will be broken. Evil brings death to the wicked, and those who hate the righteous will be condemned. The Lord redeems the life of his servants. None of those who take refuge in him will be condemned. Let's break down the psalm real quick, just so as you keep reading it over, and I know you'll keep reading it over after today, the breakdown of it. The first three verses basically are an introduction. Remember, David's writing this down, and so he wants to give the people, he's writing this down for others to use. He's writing this down for others to use in worship. It's written in such a way as to be brought into a worship setting of some sort. And so the opening three verses are kind of an introduction, kind of an introit. We have the introit every Sunday in here. The choir sings. It's a song that calls us into the worship service, that begins our worship, that sounds the theme of the day or echoes the theme of the day. And so that's what David is doing here in these first three verses. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. It's a great opening for the psalm, and it's a call for the people of God to come together and worship, and together to exalt God's name. Verses 4 through 8 speak to the particular issue that David is dealing with. Now, we don't get specifics. But again, that's because this is written for people to use in worship. You can import your own specifics into it. It doesn't matter what the specifics are. If you're a person in need and you call out to God and he helps you, then this psalm is yours to use in prayer, to proclaim and worship. But verses 4 through 8 give us the specifics of David's situation, how he sought for the Lord and the Lord helped him. And he celebrates it in these verses. We'll come back and talk about them a little bit more in just a second. But verses 9 through the end of the psalm, really, they take off from what David has done here. He's opened up with praise to God and invited people to join him in praising God. And then he has talked about his particular situation of deliverance. And now he's pressing home the point. Those who fear the Lord have such help. That's the whole point of the psalm. Those who fear the Lord will help. Those who do not fear the Lord will not help. It's really that simple. And so the rest of the psalm is a plea for people to fear the Lord. So verses 9 and 10 talk about, you need to fear the Lord. If you fear the Lord, he will supply your need. Verses 11 through 14 are a little wisdom saying. Whenever you read the words, "Come, O children," you should think of the Proverbs. If you look at Proverbs chapter 4, you'll see that in play. In Proverbs, wisdom is the woman, the teacher. the servant of God, and she beckons people to come to her so that she can teach them God's ways. This is the way of life. Listen to me. Come to me, O children. And so chapter 4 in Proverbs, listen, children. And here, this is the father who's playing the part. Listen, children, to a father's instruction and be attentive that you may gain insight. Then in verse 10, in that, hear my child and accept my words. Then again, where is it? Verse 20, my child, be attentive to my words. Then in chapter 5, my child, be attentive to my wisdom. Anytime you see those words, come, O children, and listen to me, it's a wisdom saying. And you know this wisdom saying. If you want to have a good life, this is what you do. So verses 11 through 14 are like an insertion of a proverb. So verse 9 introduces the whole subject of fearing the Lord, and verses 11 through 14 give you a little proverb. Come, O children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Which of you desires life and covets many days to enjoy good? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. That's the little proverb that's kind of inserted in there. David inserts it in there. He's teaching, he's evangelizing here. He's calling those, he's calling people who are listening to this, fear God. Get the wisdom of God in you. And here's the exact way that you do it, verses 11 through 14. And then he goes back to reiterating the point. Over and over again, he reiterates it. The righteous God listens to, the unrighteous God does not listen to. And that's what he says throughout the remainder of this passage. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their cry. The face of the Lord is against evildoers, to cut off the remembrance of them from the earth. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and rescues them from all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord rescues them from them all. He keeps all their bones, not one of them will be broken. Evil brings death to the wicked, and those who hate the righteous will be condemned. The Lord redeems the life of his servants. None of those who take refuge in him will be condemned. So you see how that plays out. Again, verse 9, this is his little sermon he's preaching to the people who are listening. Fear the Lord, fear the Lord, fear the Lord. And verses 11 through 14 give you that little proverbial saying that tells you what the fear of the Lord means. If you want to have a good life, young people, then pay attention to these words, and gives you the description of that. And then he hits the point again, verses 15 through 22. Those who are the righteous, God will hear their cries, and God will answer their cries, and God will help them. The afflictions of the righteous are many, but God is going to help them. But those who are not righteous, those who do not fear God, God will not listen to. God will cast them away. God will lead them to their own consequences. So it's, again, that second half is really a sermon, David's little sermon in the psalm. So you've got those parts teased out for you there. The first three verses are a call to worship. Join me in worship, David is saying. Let us exalt God's name together. Here's the reason that I am exalting God today. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and he delivered me from all my fears. You should look to him and be radiant, so your faces shall never be ashamed. This poor soul cried out and was heard by the Lord and was saved from every trouble. Oh, the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Happy are those who take refuge in him. So maintain the fear of the Lord, be the righteous, turn to God, and he will help you. He's affirming that from his own circumstances, his own situation. Then verses 9, like I said, verses 9 through the end of the chapter, beat the drum on that sermon. Fear the Lord. Those who fear the Lord will know his help in times of trouble. Does that make sense? Y'all have any questions about any of that to this point? It always helps me to break it down and to be able to read it, with an understanding of what he's trying to do, as much as we can tell, and I think that's true to that. Now, there are a couple things to take from this that I think are great, and one of those comes in the first three verses there. David is very much calling, he's going to proclaim God's saving grace in the company of the gathered people. This is an important point. We should find a time and a place as God's people to have a public testimonial service of some sort. You all know better than I do, but in Baptist life in times past, Wednesday nights where I was, that was a time where if you had a testimony to share, you had an opportunity to share it. When you're praying for everybody and you're talking about people's needs, you're also celebrating the good things God has done, and so you would have a time of testimonial. Sunday nights were often used for that very purpose. When we worshiped on Sunday nights, you would sing a lot of hymns and you would have testimonies. You would have a sermon, but it would be more of a relaxed time, and you would have more of the time of testimony. That's something we don't do like we should, I don't think. A psalm that really convicted me on this is in Psalm 40. And it's another psalm like this one where the psalmist, and this one's attributed to David as well, is celebrating God's saving grace. God has done something great for him. Well, if you stroll down to verse 9, you hear David saying basically, I have told everybody what you did. I didn't keep it to myself. I've told everybody what you did. Verse 9 of chapter 40. I have told the glad news of deliverance in the great congregation. See, I have not restrained my lips, as you know, O Lord. I have not hidden your saving help within my heart. I have spoken of your faithfulness and your salvation. I have not concealed your steadfast love and your faithfulness from the great congregation. There's a duty incumbent upon us to proclaim God's great deeds in our lives to others. It's really a form of evangelism. If people wonder if there's a God, they should be able to know from what we can tell them about how God's been at work in our lives. Very simple way to do it. We should find a setting, we should have a setting where we can celebrate what God has done in our lives, where we give people an opportunity to stand up and say what God has done in their lives. God expects it. David certainly believes that God expects him to have gotten up and done it. And he's saying, I did it. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I told everybody about what you did for me. We should be doing that as well. There should be sometime, some place in the life of the church. And again, it's an evangelistic type of thing. We're telling people what God has done for us. And that's one aspect of witnessing to the faith. I've told y'all before, there's the one aspect of telling people what salvation involves, the mechanics of it, what it means to be a Christian. But there's another aspect where you just tell, how do you know it's true? I know it's true because of this. I saw God do this in my life. God opened my eyes to see this. God made himself known to me in this way. So you have the experiential and you have the technical. And both of those go together in proclaiming the witness to the faith. So we should do that. We should have, and I'm thinking of ways that we can do that in our life together. But there should be opportunities for us to share testimony, to speak to what God has done for us in our lives, and to share it with others. Verse 3, oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. We're supposed to do that together. Verse 7 is probably one that you recognize. You've heard that somewhere along the way. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. We think of, God's angels and how they're dispersed, and how God has angels for us that watch over us and take care of us and help us. And so the testimony of the psalm is that the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. There's that great story in the opening chapters of 2 Samuel. I don't remember exactly where it is right off the top of my head. It's when Elijah is in a city and his servant tells him that the king has come with all his men around him and he's going to destroy them. And Elijah basically prays to God to give the servant the true vision of what's going on. And so the servant gets that vision and he looks around and he sees that all the enemy is surrounding them, yes, but surrounding the enemy are the angels of God. And so Elijah can be calm and cool because he knows the true vision of things. He knows there are angels out there. He knows there's a heavenly host that's protecting them. It's in the first chapters of 2 Samuel, 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there. but it's a great story. But we don't see the angelic host around us, protecting us, watching over us, working on our behalf, but they are out there. They are out there. And so that verse, the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers him. And that pulls together everything in this psalm. That's the point. Those who belong to God, those who are faithful to God, those who fear God, God watches over. Verse 15, the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and he hears, his ears are open to their cry. So those who belong to God can have confidence that he will watch over them and keep them and protect them in the face of any and every trouble. Now, the last thing that I will say to you, verse 19, many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord rescues them from them all. Interesting that this psalm is paired with the reading from Job, because, of course, Job's whole premise for his lament against God was that the righteous are not supposed to suffer. If you live a righteous and good life, God will bless you, and God will not let anything bad happen to you. And that's what's at stake all throughout Job. David doesn't agree. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord rescues them from all. Just because you're righteous doesn't mean you get a free pass on trouble. In fact, go to Jesus. If you are righteous, you're going to get trouble. We don't like that at all. We'd rather have Job's theology. But the theology of David, the theology of Jesus, if you are righteous, you're going to invite trouble. We live in a world that does not righteous, and it doesn't like people who are righteous, and it doesn't like people who talk about God. It doesn't want you to be good. It wants you to be sons and daughters of Satan. And so if you are righteous, you're going to suffer afflictions. You're going to suffer them just as much as everybody else does living in this sinful world, and you're going to suffer them perhaps more because you are righteous. So the promise is not that if you're righteous, you won't have any trouble. The promise is that if you are righteous, in the midst of your troubles, God will rescue you from those troubles. God will provide escape. God will provide provision. Doesn't always come the way we want it to. Doesn't mean that everything's going to get back to normal or get back to being better than what it was before. Doesn't mean that you won't walk with a limp like Jacob did after he wrestled with the angel. Nobody knows. Everybody's circumstance and situation is going to be different and unique to what God is doing in their life and what they're having to deal with, not only in that day, but in the days to come. But the promise, even though the afflictions of the righteous are many, the Lord rescues them from them all. The Lord listens when they cry out. The Lord hears. The Lord watches over them. The Lord will help them. Great psalm. Any questions or comments or things you need clarified? Again, the red parts are what you will find in the reading this Sunday. They're verses 15 and 19 are incorporated in a little bit different manner than how they appear here. They are there in the text that we will have Sunday for our service of worship. In terms of praying this psalm, lots of things from the psalm that we can draw from it. When we go into a time of trouble and we're praying to God, we can pray in confidence, trusting, knowing that God will watch over us and will keep us, waiting for him to bring deliverance to us, assured that he will do it somehow, some way, praying for him to give us the vision to see how his hand is at work in our lives and how he is going to bring us through this trouble to new life. The promise that the angel of the Lord encamps around those. Lord, I thank you that I'm surrounded by your protection. I thank you that you love me so much that you have given me my own angel to help me in this time of trouble. Help me to be sensitive to that truth all along the way. Help me to be sensitive to the ways in which you are working in my life all along the way. Lots of words of comfort and assurance, even as there are words of reality in this passage as well. Thank you all for being here. Yes, Ann. Yes. agree. One church that I served, we did something on that nature. We had a blessings box, and we invited people to write down how God had blessed them. And so rather than, a lot of people don't like to get up and talk in front of everybody, especially in front of the whole congregation when they're all gathered. And so one of the ways to do what we're talking about, to testify to God's work, was just to, give them a pencil, piece of paper, and let them write down what God had done for them. And they could stick it in. They could either write their name on it or not. But we would put it in the newsletter each month. We'd put the little blessings corner, and we would, so-and-so testified about God's help in this or that or whatever. But we took whatever they wrote and put it in the newsletter. And so it was a way of testifying to God's grace. That was one thing that had come to mind for me, but you've jogged it again. Many ways that we can go about doing that. But we need to be talking about what God has done in our lives. We do. We do. Amen to that. Amen to that. Yes. Whoops. I think they're telling us it's time to go. Ken said to wrap it up. All right. Anything else for today? All right. Thank you all.